Haryana University. He's an assistant professor, and today he'll be talking about protein ligand binding through the lens of machine learning. So I think we're going to have another exciting machine learning talk, and so we're looking forward to it. Navjeet, please go ahead and start your presentation.
Thank you, Tarak, and I would like to thank organizers for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to present in this big platform. I will be talking about very focused problem, and it is very interesting also and very crucial also, because all the simulations data when we used, they all depend on collective variable, and we have discussed in this rare meet also that there are different ways how you achieve these collective variable to get the different properties. So as previously we have shown that one can achieve the binding of ligand if you start from the bulk solvent. You place your ligand in the bulk solvent. We have shown here benzene, putting a benzene in the bulk solvent, and it finally diffuse throughout the solvent, then diffuse at the surface, and finally bound the final binding pose. So this one we have done using just GPU based machine, and we simulated very long simulation, completely unbiased way. So this was the one system, T4 lysozyme, and we shown the benzene binding to the cavity, which is very deeply buried. Another system which we have simulated was the camphor binding protein, that is cytochrome P450. In this system also, we have shown that if you place your ligand in the bulk solvent and allow it to diffuse, and it will slowly go to the intermediate state, and it will wait there, it will try to do some chemistry there, and then slightly finally enter into the binding pocket that is also very deeply buried. And we have not just run one long simulations, we have run very long multiple simulations, and we have achieved very interesting events in these simulations. As we can see that in the top figure A, we can see that the three multiple trajectories. In all three trajectories, cytochrome P450, when it binds, when CAM binds to cytochrome 50, there is a very long intermediate states, and then it is a final bound state, which is very close to the crystal structure. Similarly, we have shown that when you have this T4 lysozyme, it also has similar binding events, but there are interestingly different kind of intermediate states. Some are very fast binding, some medium time events which wait for some time, then enter into the binding site, and then there are long binding events also, where the ligand waits very long time and then enter into the final binding site. But in case of cytochrome P50, there is only a single dominant pathway, but in case of T4 lysozyme, we have multiple binding pathways there. So we have used a good CV there, and with using that very good CV, we have achieved very excellent results in the terms of binding kinetics, thermodynamics, where we have shown that the kinetics of binding and unbinding is very close to the experimental values, and they are in excellent agreement for P450 CAM also. And we have also shown that if you have T4 lysozyme, you have multiple binding pathways, still you achieve very good kinetics using computer simulations in an unbiased way. K1 and K-off was very good in was in excellent agreement with the experimental values. And we also have achieved the many binding pathways in case of T4 lysozyme, and we have shown that how they are connected to each other, how they interconvert to one matter stable state to another matter stable state. But in case of cytochrome P450, we have shown there is only single dominant pathways, and it always prefer that only, and it follow the same trend in all three trajectories. But there was some few problems which we were not able to solve with this very good CVs. So what was the things which we did not achieve using this very excellent CVs was how protein conformational plasticity is regulating the ligand binding. Means we can see that, okay, ligand is going and it's waiting, it's entering into the pocket, there are multiple pathways, but we did not able to get that how this protein is acting on the ligand. Is this their protein conformation which are playing a crucial role for ligand to select its final bound states, or ligand is just only the trigger point for the binding of the final bound state? So we try to understand what may be the issues there when we try to use protein plasticity with ligand binding. So the major issue was that when we use an automated method, which use a CV generation protocol, and if we combine the protein plasticity with the ligand binding, we have seen that the bound state and unbound state not getting separated. Means protein conformations always getting some states of bound state, some are unbound state. There was a mixing of bound and unbound states. So we tried to look into that, what may be the reason. So we propose that there may be two reasons. One is there may be time scale difference, means dynamical time is too disparate in both events. As you can see, and in this trajectory, I have shown a schematic there. We can map the trajectory into different states. Each frame is mapped like 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3. And we can see that 3 state is having unbound state also and bound state also if we put the ligand state on that conformation. But another maybe reason that we have too much fluctuations in the protein, which are hindering the separation of the events, which are not able to separate the unbound to bound state in the protein conformation. So if we use a new CV with less noise, it may separate out like 3' states will become from 3, and there will be no mixing of the states. So as we know that machine learning is getting very popular these days, we try to look into that. Can we solve this problem using machine learning approach? So we want to solve that protein plasticity should be get separated during ligand binding. So we have used two systems. In one system, we have induced feed mechanism. Induced feed mechanism is what? Like ligand is coming to the intermediate state, and it is ligand is inducing the conformational change, like it is placing some side chains and then entering into the pocket, and then final achieving the binding steps, like it's getting into the final binding site. In another case, we have T4 lysozyme. T4 lysozyme has multiple binding pathways, and ligand has different way of entering into the pocket, but we can say that this is following the conformational selection. Means protein already have the pre-existing conformation which is required for the binding of the ligand. So to understand it, that what may be the problem if we use the just protein conformations to get the CV, final CV, and look into this how ligand is positioned on the top of it. So we have used very standard procedure here. The standard procedure is that we have the residue distance, which is a protein conformational plasticity like features. And in this residue distance matrix is used as the input CV. Then we have used a very standard protocol which for dimensional reduction technique like time structure independent component analysis. And we have obtained the slowest dimensions, and we projected our trajectory on those first two slowest dimensions. And to understand the ligand positions on the top of the surface, we color the surface according to the distance of ligand from the cavity. Like you can see the bound is, these are 3 trajectories projected on this slowest tick 1 and tick 2, dimension 1 and dimension 2. And the blue color is representing the ligand inside the pocket. And when you see the red color, it is a unbound state completely in the bulk side. So as one can see that in these all 3 trajectories, the blue surface or blue side, binding side is completely separated. There is no mixing, and other states are separated from the binding events. So when we have shown that in induced fit mechanism, there is clear separation between the bound and unbound state. It means whatever CV we are using, and we are using just protein conformations to get our input CV, and the bound states and bound states getting clearly separated even without considering the ligand positions there. But as soon as we move to another system, that is benzene binding to T4 lysozyme, this benzene has multiple pathways of binding. It has conformation selection model, and we follow the same exercise. Like we have input CV as a residue distances, native contact picturizer. We have used a time structure independent component analysis as a dimensional reduction techniques. We projected each trajectory along the slow dimensions, first 2 slow dimensions. We color the surface according to the ligand distance from the binding site. Like this is the surface of trajectory 1 for trajectory 2 and trajectory 3. All these trajectories are colored according to the distance from the ligand. Like bound is blue and red is unbound. If you see all 3 trajectories, they have different kind of behavior. Trajectory 1, there is no blue on the surface, completely red means like all the bound configuration are scattered throughout the surface. But if you look into second trajectory, it has slight blue, but very light blue. It means it's going more than 10 angstrom distance. And then it's showing that, okay, these conformations are distributed, but not very clustered at one place. Trajectory 3 get very clear separation. Means bound state and unbound states are completely separated. So we have proposed two methods that, okay, there may be two reasons for this. One is there are different time scales. Time scales are completely different due to events. To nullify it or to test it, we have compared the implied time scales of two events. One time implied time scales for ligand binding, when we are considering ligand going from a bulk to a solvent, and another is a protein plasticity only. As one can compare these two time scales, we can say they are not very different. We can compare them. So there is a time scale is not the main cause which is causing the mixing of these events. So how to solve this one? So it means there is a noise in our data which are hindering our separation of mixed and bound state. So we have standard procedure in which we have residue distances as input CV. We use the demonstration technique, time structure independent component analysis, and we project our surface trajectory on the slowest dimension. In our procedure, what we have used, okay, instead of this going from directly input to input CV to this dimension reduction, we add another layer of supervised machine learning. In supervised machine learning, what we are doing? We are providing the ligand positions to the CVs and trying to identify, okay, which residue pairs are crucial for the binding of this ligand. So for this purpose, we have used random forest classifier, and from this random forest classifier, we have used feature selection approach. So what is random forest approach? In random forest is a supervised machine learning approach which uses a decision tree, and it generates an ensemble of decision trees using bootstrap methods. It selects the samples from the original input CVs and generate the multiple trees. And these from multiple trees, it finally generate the final model and give us the classification of bound and unbound states. So what are the advantages of this method? First, we can choose the descriptors which are decisive factor to classifications. Another, there is no overfitting in this method because we are using a voting method and we not just bias to one or one matrix or another matrix. Second is it's very easy to train. We can interpret it very easily. There's no black box in this. So we have our standard procedure. We have added one layer, that is random forest classifier feature selection. So in random forest, what we are doing, we have trajectory data. From three trajectories, we have residue pairs. Here X1, capital X1, capital X2, capital X3 to capital XN. So we have total n number of residue pairs, and these residue pairs are having distances between during trajectory. So X1, 2, 3, 4, M. M is the number of frames. When we combine all three trajectories, we generate a matrix. And we label each frame with bound or unbound using distance criteria. If this is close to the pocket, it is bound. If it is not close to pocket, it is unbound. Then we provided these input features to the random forest classifier. It did bootstrapping, it generated the samples, it did decision trees, then generated some trees, and from the trees voting, it got the final model. In this process, it also provides the score to features, like the importance of each features in the model. So we can use this importance score, which is we obtained using Gini method, to select the pairs which are crucial for binding. So we have looked cumulative score of these importance of features, and we've identified there are 200 residue pairs out of almost 800 pairs, which are necessary for this ligand binding only. And as you can see, the previously which we have shown, so I'm just again revising my this previously. As we have used standard procedure, in standard procedure we have this Tika surface. In each Tika surface we have color according to this ligand distance. If blue blue is bound, means either conformations belonging to that bin is blue, it means that the states belonging to that particular bin is bound. And if it is red, it means they are unbound. So when we use a standard procedure, we've identified that the standard procedure did not separated the bound and unbound state in trajectory 1. In trajectory 2, there was a mixing of states like blue becoming to the cyan color or blue color, light blue color. It means there is a mixing of conformations here. But in trajectory 3, we have the separation of events, like we have bound state separate, unbound state separate. But as soon as we use the random forest algorithm, we use input features, we provided to random forest classifier. From the random forest classifier, we calculated the feature score using this ensemble of trees, and we have selected 200 residue pairs which were having good cumulative scores. And these 200 residue pairs we have again provided to the Tika dimensions or Tika dimensionalization techniques, that is time structure independent component analysis. And when we obtain it, we can clearly see that the trajectory 1 along tick 1 and tick 2 has separation of events. Like previously there was a mixing, now there is no mixing in the events. Blue color is getting completely separated from the red states. Means the conformation which was getting not separated from the bound and unbound states, now it's clearly separated. Similarly, in trajectory 2, there is, in the previous we were having a light blue color. Now the dark blue color is completely separated and is clustered in the same place only. In trajectory 3, we already get separation, but now in this case, when we use random forest, we still get the separation, but better way. Like it improved the previously whatever noise was there. So another question comes, okay, what are these residues in this process which we got good feature score? So for that one, what we did, we projected these residue pairs on the top of protein surface, and we have shown these residue in the sphere form and the connection residue distances in the form of bond. So as one can see that there are two domains, C domain where the ligand binds and N domain which is very far away from it. So the residue which when projected on the surface are not clustered in the binding site only. So they are not just residue which are involving the binding, they are scattered throughout the surface. So it means it's not just residue belonging to the binding site which is causing the binding to the, or which is classifying the binding site, binding events. When we want to compare, okay, if we have three different trajectories and the three different trajectories shows different binding pathways, is any their role of these different kind of networks? So what we did, we have unbound state ensemble and bound state ensemble on the Tika surface. So what we did, we selected some conformations, representative conformation from unbound state and some representative conformation from bound state. And what we did, we calculated the change in the fluctuations, like if going from unbound to bound, what is happening to that bond or connections. And we projected this change in fluctuations on this 3D surface to see, okay, which residue pair got affected for three different trajectories. When we compare these three different trajectories, we found that even though in the trajectory 1, ligand binds from H4, H6, where I have shown binding site arrow, these residues are not getting much affected, but the residue which is very far away from the site is getting large conformational changes. Means the motions of these residues which are very far away are responsible for H4 or H6 binding pathways. In case of second trajectory, we've seen that on the binding site where we have seen more large conformational changes. In this case, ligand binds from H7 or H9 helices. So these two trajectories are showing different kind of pattern of the fluctuation in the residue pair which we have selected from random forest methods. But in trajectory 3, where we have seen that there is no change if you use random forest method or not, or without random forest method. So what we see that there is a conformational change in the all residue pairs are minimal, means that there is similar kind of pattern of fluctuations using random forest and without random forest. It means these all residue have same kind of contributions throughout the trajectories. So it's not the only thing which we can see that from this analysis. What we can see that the classifier has predicted residues, and these residues are in position which is allosteric side, means they are very far away from the distant side. And when we compare these residues, we found that there are residues 18, 22, 137, which is showing very thick change in the conformations or a thick bond. These residues has been reported previously in this T4 lysozyme that they play a crucial role in the protein and ligand binding and the hinge motions, which allow it to the breathing motions to this protein also, and which help us these ligands protein to allow ligand to enter into the pocket. So these all three residues have multiple residue pairs in this N-terminal domain, so that they can control the breathing motions of this whole protein, so that ligand get the chance to enter into the pocket. So what we have learned from all this exercise, that we have proposed a method which can easily remove the noise from the trajectory data, which shows that if you use automated method to get the to separate out the bound and bound state from the conformational ensemble, you can remove the noise using random forest method, which is supervised method to separate out the noise from the unbound to bound ensemble. Another thing, what we have learned, that if there is an induced fit mechanism where ligand is changing the conformational change to the protein, then there is no need to use any machine learning approach. The standard approach, that is linear approach, is sufficient to resolve the protein conformational plasticity and ligand binding. So if you have conformational selection, then it's better to remove the noise before going to the final any dimensional technique. You just select a subset of residue, and if you have induced fit mechanism, you don't need any random forest or any supervised or any machine learning approach. Linear techniques are sufficient to separate those events. We also have observed that there are residues which are not close binding sites, they are allosteric sites, which also play a crucial role in the protein ligand binding and protein conformational changes. I would like to acknowledge my mentor, postdoc mentor, Dr. Jagannath Mandal, who has provided me a very good guidance during these projects. And I would like to acknowledge the resources of TFR Hyderabad Computing Facility, where all the work has been carried out. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Navjeet. It was a wonderful talk. And before anyone starts typing questions, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Yes.
I'm curious, rather.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So this you talked about starting from this residue contacts, you do one level of filtering by using this random forest, and then you feed these things to the teacup.
We have selected the subset of the residue pairs.
Okay. Yes.
So we have suppose n residue pairs, which has some non-relevant pairs.
True.
So what you do, just you remove some of the pairs which are not relevant for the binding events.
For that, you are using the random forest.
So we are using supervised method, so that we select the residue pairs which are necessary for the protein conformational change and ligand binding. Okay. And then we use this linear approach, time structure independent compound analysis, so that we can add the time also, and we get a time separated conformations which are not bound and unbound together.
Okay, so in this random forest classifier case, you get the ways for the residue contacts, and thus you can remove them as noise.
What?
So from this random forest classifier, you can kind of find out those features which have a lot of weight.
Miss, we get feature score for each variable, like, and you select the top features according to that weight. Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So in the TICA analysis, I guess you ran few simulations, right? Unbinding events.
No. We have already simulated data, binding data already. We want to
Okay.
get the analysis of that binding events, because you cannot
I
get
see.
just one CV is not giving all the results. Like when we got the binding kinetics and pathways, we missed the protein conformational plasticity.
Okay. So you have multiple unbinding events that you trajectories, right?
We have multiple
Okay.
trajectories for the binding events, like independent binding event trajectories.
Okay. So now one thing that comes to my mind, so do you think this CV, the collective variable that you used, might impact your time of unbinding?
No. It's just if you shuffle when we are using this random forest, it's take the subset from the conformation. So it's not just taking time events there. It's just a random conformation. It's selecting which are labeled according to the bounded and bound events.
I see.
And then building the trees, so get the decision it can take.
I see. And these unbinding trajectories that you generate, those are biased or?
I did not consider unbinding trajectory here. For MSM, we considered that only. Here we have considered only the trajectories which were having complete reaction cycle, like going from unbound to complete bound events.
I see. The last one, in one of your slides, I saw the unbound state is a bit deeper than the bound state. Probably, yeah, that one or the next one. Yeah, this one, yeah. No,
this one.
Previous one, the first TICA 1, TICA 2 plot. Is there something the ligand is getting stabilized in the solvent?
Unbound state.
Yeah.
This is actually this in this CV. I have not considered ligand positions. It's a protein conformational plasticity only.
Okay.
I have considered input CV, which is having only residue distances.
Okay.
And ligand is not present in this CV. So
right.
The conformational has some different kind of ensemble, and they have some favorable conformation, some are unfavorable.
Yeah, in that.
And unbinding is based on I have mapped the binding events on these conformations.
Okay, in that, yeah. So that makes sense because the protein is getting ready to bind the ligand probably. That's why.
So we'd like to identify that which conformations are available for ligand binding and how they are interchanging to each other. I mean, what are the time scales and how they get. So when you do clustering and you want to build a model, you need to separate these bind and unbound events. Otherwise, you will get that same events was having bound events and same conformation was having unbound events. So you will not be able to interpret. Either you will do manual separation of these two events, or you will get the mixing of the events. Like you will not be able to get the one answer at the same time. Either you miss the binding or you miss the protein plasticity.
That's true. Thanks. There's one question from the chat box from Sudarshan, and he is saying that I was wondering if RF classifier, random forest classifier will be useful for biased trajectories as well.
One can use biased trajectories also, because we are not using time profile here. Because in all these analysis, we have used time profile only in time structure independent component analysis when we reduce the dimensions. But to train your system, you just need a conformations which are labeled with bound and unbound events. In this approach, you can identify which residue pairs are crucial for the particular two different kind of events. Classifying the events based on supervised learning only. And our main objective was we should add the supervised learning when we have too much noise in our system.
Yeah, so thanks. The last one quick one. Somebody is asking how long these trajectories are. And in case of protein ligand unbinding, the conformational plasticity, they take place in millisecond time scale. So would you like to comment on this? How long the trajectories are?
They are microsecond long trajectories.
Microsecond, okay. So he's saying that sometimes it takes milliseconds to see these conformational transitions. But anyway, I think for that you need to run on bias simulations.
No, for that one has to go for the Markov state model.
Markov state modeling, yes.
It's just to get the pairs which are necessary for this, to separate these or which are responsible for binding. And then you can generate this Markov state model from that one, and you can calculate the protein kinetics also from there.
And in fact, one can run biased simulations and then do this TICA analysis, provided you have to take care of these weights that generate bias.
Yes.
Okay, then.
Thank you.
Yeah, Suman, Dr. Suman has a question, so please go ahead.
Okay, Navjeet, really nice talk, and actually you have made a few of my slides redundant. Thanks for that. But anyway, so I had two kind of clarifications. One is that what is your binding coordinate here? How you're characterizing the binding and unbinding?
I have used the distance criteria from the pocket.
Okay, and then since you are looking at the coupling bit, so can we look at the, when you are looking at the coupling between the binding coordinate and the conformational coordinate, can we look into that, which happens first? Is there a time series information
No, that's the main objective of this one, that if you say that okay, time scale is different, that's why you are getting mixing of events, or some fluctuations which are not necessary for this dimension reduction techniques, which are hindering this separation. How to remove those parts? So what we use, you have to select a subset of the residue pairs which are only responsible for binding. Then you will not be having the protein conformations which are irrelevant for binding.
Okay. No, I was curious that as the ligand is approaching, so then how the protein is sensing that approach. So then
induced fit mechanism, there is no problem because ligand is changing the conformation chain. So automatically they get separated. But when you have conformational selection, so you have ensemble of conformations, they are fluctuating throughout the time. But all the fluctuations are not relevant for the binding. Okay. Some residue pairs are the triggering events, or when ligand will interact the protein, those motions will be dictate the ligand binding to that one. So we need to identify those residue motions which are dictating the ligand binding when it interacting with the protein surface, because it is when it is diffusing in the water, there's protein motions are irrelevant to that ligand.
Okay. And my second quick question was that when you talked about this allostery, do you have any information about the coupling, that how the binding site to the allosteric site, how exactly it propagates? Did you look?
It is not a continuous network there, because it's a sparse network which has disconnectivity. So you cannot calculate the shortest path from there. If you want to calculate the network pathways, you have to have complete network again, and you have to weight these nodes according to the feature score. Then you can generate the pathways also, because as you can see, there is no connection between N domain and C domain in between, just only they are going through the hinge only. And in some trajectory they have larger weight, in some trajectory they have lesser weight.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, really nice talk, nice work.